you guided me to align on a client vision, and you set up an initial Pinterest board, and then you showed me a bunch of ideas, and I started to know what I liked and I didn't like. This is our shared board. Again, the comic book will be called Unmade Men. And then Dee, talk to me about why you guided me to use a Pinterest board, how this helped you as a designer to communicate with me, and then what you got out of what I was placing in there.
When I put together the Pinterest board of all the research that I did, I was basically trying to narrow down the direction of what we were looking for, right? The original Pinterest board, we had a couple of different things about maybe looking a little bit like Apocalypse Boulevard, some different colors, some different sort of ranges. I mean, the 80s, I wasn't sure at that time what exact year it would be. So I wasn't sure if we were going sort of 1987 versus 1983. It's a very different look. On top of that, I knew that you wanted Vegas, but Vegas has a very specific look, and it's very set culturally coming out of the 60s. So a lot of those things put together, you gave me the feedback that you wanted it to look much more neon and much more sort of drive-in, like much more sort of, it may have been built in the 60s, but it's 20 years on. And so we put together this board together, and it gave me a lot more ideas about not only the different types of fonts that I could use to sort of juxtapose the two words, unmade and men, like a lot of these here. Looking through this, it gave me an idea of sort of how to juxtapose the two words, how to lay them out on a line, or on a sign rather, and the types of shapes and colors that you were looking for.
And I think one of the key things that you guided me to understand was that if we are using neon, we're using a limited palette, because neon only at that time came in a couple of colors, and that there were also those shapes, the swooping arrows, that flourish of arrows over here, you know, that contrast, that purposeful contrast of this fancy script and this block type. And, you know, I kind of knew what I wanted, but I couldn't articulate it. And so you, by creating the first board, how did you narrow that down into some sort of coherent mock-up?
So the first thing was that we narrowed it down to specifically neon. You knew you wanted neon. You knew you wanted it to look very Vegas-like translated to Atlantic City. So that helped a lot to narrow down the focus. The second thing was that you said specifically, you really wanted it to look like sort of a rundown place. Like this place hasn't been updated in a while. And so that gave me the focus to not look at super high-flying, multi-layered neon. Also, that you liked some of the shapes that were on here, which gave me the guidance to use those similar shapes in some of the mock-ups that I did. I did put it on a couple of bright backgrounds, but being is that a lot of this stuff happens at night, pushing it more towards a darker aesthetic also helped get to where we were hoping to go.
Tell me what you were doing here with this slide here.
Okay, so this is another one of those things that I was talking about. Like when you see this image, what's the first thing you think of? When you see that orange image, is there a decade that you think of?
Definitely like the late 60s.
Right. Culturally, that's what we reference as being psychedelic, being the 60s, sort of a music movie scene, right? If we were to say this was something that was set in 2004, you would look at that and say, not really. It doesn't make sense, right? So culturally, we have this awareness of visuals that are associated with different times and different places. So the next one, obviously, it's Vegas. I mean, it says Vegas, but you see that sign. Pretty much anyone who's ever seen a movie or ever been traveling in the United States, like, that's Vegas. You know what that's about. That's a casino town. You know what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Like the whole ad campaign, everything about it, it's been the same for more than 30 years. And so our visual awareness says, this is a place where gambling happens. This is a casino place. This is an entertainment place. This is a place people travel, right? And so there's a lot of things that come around with that. Visually, you don't need to do a lot. If you want to say it's in Vegas, snap up that sign and you're already there. It saves you the trouble as a writer or as an illustrator of adding all of that background, because that signifies where we already are. So if you scroll down, these are the two that I pulled offline. And I wanted to make this point. I pulled up a bunch of stuff from sort of searches in Google. This picture here on the left with our fantastic billboard above our arcade and the guy in his fantastic gym socks. Double check that image. That is from the 1980s.
Dee gave me some things to work on and came up with these four. Which one do you think represents a comedy crime caper called Unmade Men. It takes place in around 1987, 1989 with a heist gone wrong on the Atlantic City boardwalk.
I like two of them, but I like the bottom right one.
That's the one I chose, Mike.